So again, we want to get a few things accomplished. We want to kind of walk you through what we believe are best practices for you guys as agency owners as it relates to loss control and how you manage things. And then also want to give you a prelude into the staff training and how that's going to sequence over the next couple of weeks after this. That makes sense? Okay, so introductions, loss control, and staff program. From an essential standpoint, there's a few of us on the call today, and I'll let everybody kind of introduce themselves. I've been in front of you guys, I believe, and I'm sure Kevin's talked poorly about me. So Brad Sorenson, Chief Implementation Officer. My role here is we do a lot of consulting in various areas, right, as it relates to everything from strategically where you want to take your business to something like today's topic, which is very kind of real and tactical for you. David, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so well, it says on board chair, that is correct, but I did 32 years as a chief officer of distribution for a major insurance company. I've spent the last 17 years working with predominantly independent agents, focused on helping them grow their business. And I've been a partner with Iscential for the last more than a decade, helping them grow their business. So that basically means I'm old, but I've got a lot of varied experiences in working with distribution systems, particularly insurance and financial services area. So happy to chat with anybody at any time.
And then we do have a couple people from Iscential that are really what I would call more the experts in the topic. So Stephanie, I think you're on if you want to say hi and introduce yourself.
Yes, I am. Good afternoon. Stephanie Garza, Director of Support. I've been with the agency for 12 years now. Work with our customer service teams and help in bringing new talent into the team and then advancing them through the organization. Our team are the resources for a lot of the work that's done throughout the agency to support the operations.
And then lastly, Mark, if you want to introduce yourself, get a little bit about your background too.
Great, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Mark Michaels. I'm the Director of Claims, Quality, and Loss Control. So multiple duties here. So been in the business for probably a little over 30 years in claims and have handled, any type of claim you can pretty much think of. So been with Iscential for about 4 years, and then before that time was with three major carriers, Farmers, Nationwide, and Travelers. So glad to assist you guys today.
Okay, so we wanted to start out broadly. So David, I think you're going to handle this slide as it relates to talking about loss and stuff at the aggregate level.
Yeah. So guys, we could have started off. Brad and I could actually do a couple hours just off what's going on in the insurance industry today. The interesting quote that I found as I was trying to update some research on loss control trends is that underwriting and risk management remain the cornerstones of the insurance value chain. That was true when I started in the business 1,000 years ago. It's true today. As you look at what I put down as the first bullet, we could spend a lot of time about inflation, supply chain, lack of workers, social inflation. All of those things are driving loss costs, in addition to the fact that each one of you are aware that for 30 years, we had 5 major cats. I'd call a major cat $1 billion claims per year. In the last 5 years, we've had 80. So you add that on to what's laid out there with inflation, supply chain, all of that stuff. What I'm trying to portray is this is not only an issue with SNA about what's going on with loss costs and loss control, but it's an industry-wide issue because a lot of the major carriers are struggling profitability-wise, whether it's property casualty. On the life side, you've seen a bunch of them get out. But we're going to focus predominantly, not predominantly, but we're going to focus today on personal lines. So I took, and these won't be surprise. And by the way, feel free to ask questions as we're going along, because this isn't supposed to be a monologue. But we're focused today on personal lines. So the bullets on this page are really what the carriers are doing. So from a loss control standpoint, from an auto, what they're really trying to do is gather more information about the driver. They're trying to understand driver's speed, driver's use of brakes, driver's this, driver's that, mileage used. Are they doing it in congested areas, whatever? What they're really doing is they're gathering information to fight claims. That the drivers, well, they're promoting it as a usage thing, so you only pay for what you use. They're also using it to fight claims as they go forward, with the driver being at fault for doing things that are not considered normal. What they're not talking about on the auto side are simple things that as we get into working with your producers and talking about what you guys have set up for them as your target markets, what's driving a lot of auto claims, in addition to the stuff that's up there, are the fact that we have, for the first time, almost as many people driving that are over 79 as we have people under 24. And you go, well, okay, that's logical. Well, the people, males 75 and older, are driving PIP claims because they're not as quick to react. They are causing, not only do they're not as quick to react, so they're in more accidents, but because of their age, they need more health care and they take a longer time to recover. So the industry's not talking a lot about that. The industry's not also talking as much about the fact that if you're doing a lot of interstate driving, you're tending to drive straight roads all the time. You get bored, you get distracted, you fall asleep. Interstate driving is causing claims to rise significantly. So I'm talking about stuff that's not cat related. On the homeowner side, what the carriers are doing is they're talking about, intelligent homes. We're going to have everything connected from water backup, the temperature of your house. You know, you can order a refrigerator today that will tell you what's in there and what's not. And if there's any kind of issues, they'll immediately notify the homeowner and the carrier so that proactive things can happen on the claim side. What they're not talking to you about is the fact that homes today have a lot more water features, and what's driving lots and lots of homeowners claims at an exponential cost are water losses. There are water losses from old hoses on washing machines. There are water losses from old pipes. And it's costing lots of money. So from a loss control thing, because I've been doing this for 1,000 years, the thing I would tell you immediately on auto and home is your producers have to go out and physically meet the clients and get an assessment about what's going on, how many people are in the house, how old the cars are, all of that stuff about the home and the auto that you don't get. On a cyber front, which is starting to, most home policies exclude that. The carriers are trying to figure it out, so that means they're excluding it. But it's something to find out about. Are they working at home? All those kinds of things. And then I added flood on here as part of because perhaps not as much with your association, but what's actually happening in the insurance industry is we have more people moving to the coasts. We have more people moving to warmer weather. And what that means is there's more pavement. There's less places for stuff to run off. And the federal government, in their wisdom, finally decided that they would start to charge flood risks with the rates that they deserve as opposed to homogenize them. So that's still something that's going on. But things as we go forward, and Mark Michaels, if you have any things that you would add to what I just said, I just wanted to portray this is an industry issue right now. And you guys are kind of on the forefront of trying to figure it out so that you can remain profitable. But the carriers aren't figuring it out any faster than you are. But they're taking punitive, knee-jerk reactions in a number of cases because they haven't figured it out. So I applaud you guys for being ahead of the curve and working on this stuff. Mark, anything you'd add?
Yeah,
that you're seeing?
Yeah, one thing you've got up there at the top, the biggest thing is the telematics. That's huge right now with carriers. They're offering some pretty good discounts. So I would encourage, the clients to utilize that when they can. On the homeowner side, they're scared of water, all the underwriters. So anything that is deteriorating or is old, they're going to want that checked out and resolved. So I would recommend get intimate with your clients and know what they have. Like David said earlier, if you can have the customer just send you some photos of some things on the loss control piece, as far as water heaters, that type of thing, or get a plumber to, check out the house for leaks, that type of thing. Overall, if you do that, you're going to have a less riskier home. So I would say get intimate with them.
So the other thing I would add on home, and I'll shut up so we can get into the meat of this, is I forgot to mention drones. The carriers are using drones to check out neighborhoods to determine roof ages, check for water areas, all of that, fences, all those kinds of things as part of their arsenal to determine where to be and where not to be. Those are things you can leverage as well. So anyway, I will be quiet.
No, yeah, be quiet. So I wanted David to kind of kick things off because I wanted to start first at the 100,000 foot level, right? You've got carriers that are, if they weren't serious about mitigation, they are serious about mitigation today. And you've got carriers all across the board as it relates to restricting, taking actions, doing everything they can to recalibrate to say, what risk do I want and what risk do I don't? I'm assuming you guys are seeing the same thing that we're seeing in the markets that we play in. All these things seem like just some kind of one-offs, but the general theme is the loss ratios, the trade combined ratios the carriers are running at are wildly out of control. And they're getting very serious. And what we're going to shift to then is, look, your carriers are going to do the things they're going to do. What would we see you guys can do as agency owners then to take care of your own backyard from a loss control and a risk mitigation standpoint?
So as Brad, sorry for interrupting.
No, don't worry about that.
All of this stuff we're going to talk to you about will only matter if you're hiring quality people and have good quality processes to train and educate them. So Brad's going to go through a ton of great material here, but you also got to think about the quality of people you're bringing in and your training and education processes. And he's going to get into that more, but without that component is foundational piece. If you're not doing that, the rest of this stuff's not really going to matter. So I want to lay that out there.
Yeah, and David, you're exactly right. And that's why, because to a great degree for Iscential, Stephanie and Mark are really kind of more on the forefront of any people that we have in our organization, because if you don't pay attention to it, it just gets lost. It doesn't get managed. And so you got to purposely look at it. So when we were putting this together, you think about, okay, if I'm going to be serious about loss control, first of all, what impact of not paying attention does it have on my business? Obviously can have a negative connotation from revenue, whether it be you lose markets and you can't solve a client need, or you have a loss ratio problem and contingencies and things like that go away. Depending on the customer and how they were set up and sold, it can have a very negative input into the experience, and then even the credibility you have within your marketplace, especially if they're getting canceled, things like that, that maybe could have been avoided or at least managed up front. David referenced this, and I don't know your group in total, but hopefully you've got what a pretty defined, what your agency stand for. Are you price? Are you convenience? Are you coverage? Are you, I thoroughly understand your needs. You all should have some driven, defined way in which what value you bring to your clients. Bringing on a client that doesn't fit your agency value proposition can actually erode it. It can impact your staff, and it can clearly impact your market as it relates to eventually what you want to try to be in the marketplace. From a carrier relation, Mark saw it from being at major carriers. David saw it. I saw it. Look, all the carriers have a perception for you guys as a group and for you guys as individual agencies to whether you write quality business. Like it or not, they look at things and they understand, wow, the Hollingsworth agency has out of control losses. I don't know if I want to keep them. I may not give them as much love. I may restrict them. So those carrier relations have probably never been as magnified as they are now as it relates to, it's not just about, are you writing a lot of business? And you used to be able to write a lot of business and maybe overcome loss ratios. I would say those days are starting to dwindle as it relates to being able to negotiate just the top end. And then obviously it can have a market availability restriction for you. If you at an agency level or even an association level lose, for instance, an appointment, you may limit who all you can actually go to market for. Any questions about this? This one to me is the more intuitive. We know we got to pay attention to it. It's more how do we?
And for those of you that are wondering, we are going to get into what we're going to talk to your staffs about, but we thought we needed to set the tone with you to make sure you're having these same kinds of conversations with your folks. So if you're wondering where we're going, that's kind of the direction we're headed, was set high-level expectations of what we can do and then get into the detail of what we're going to talk to your teams about. So sorry, Brian.
No, perfect, David. Thank you. It pivots to this because really kind of the causes that we see collectively, whether it is within our group or anybody that we've ever consulted with, is it is around, do you have good, stable processes, but a little broader than just a flow of business. So for instance, insufficient staff training. And Stephanie, maybe you can talk a little bit from your perspective over the last few years. How has even our training changed as it relates to around loss control and things that they can do that you've probably accelerated or developed more?
I would say, since I've always been responsible for hiring the entry-level staff and filling those positions, we've started from the ground up. Now my peers are responsible for hiring more of the experienced insurance professionals. However, in doing that, sometimes you find that there's gaps, or you have to unlearn some prior behaviors from another agency. So one thing that we've done is, even if an experienced employee is joining the agency, they have to go through kind of the beginner's training and we kind of have to give them a pass of, you know the basics. So now, you can do what you came in to do. Checking in regularly and really evaluating that they know what they know is critical.
I would also say too, and I know on the service side, and we've done this on the sales side, we have really flushed out probably what was in our head and created a much more kind of regimented training curriculum so that we get touch points to make sure, are people progressing the way that we expect, and are they actually building a skill, or are they just regurgitating something in the moment and something that they don't stick with? If the SNA group is interested, we could always share at a really high level what our training curriculum looks like for service people and salespeople, because you'll see that we're trying to make sure that we master the things that we think are important for their role. That kind of actually pivots to the second one. Traditionally, what we see is people will get involved or participate or try to quote carriers where they really don't know the products. And I would tell you on the sales side, for instance, look, we have over 100 carriers accessible. When we bring people in, we have an expectation that they just learn a few carriers. We do not want this rampant, you're going to just randomly quote and not really know what carrier nuances may be in place, whether it's restrictions, whether it's things that are or aren't covered, whatever it might be. We make sure that carrier knowledge is carried through. And I think, Stephanie, on the service side, we've actually started to develop experts on the service side by carrier too, so that if there's ever a moment where people don't know, you got somebody to go to, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And we have kind of a massive proficiency grid that we build out for each employee. And so within like a personal lines team or the commercial lines team, we can see where the gaps are with their carrier expertise. And so you bring your new person in and you're going to focus on these 3 carriers because no one's really mastered those. So you can kind of fill the gaps.
And I realize, I mean, you guys may want to think about it at the agency level or maybe even the association level, depending on how networked you are. You may say, well, I don't have the bandwidth to have an expert for all my key carriers within a given agency. Maybe at the association level you do, depending on how helpful and how much you interact. The third one, to me, is interesting because the check and balance can happen at the policy and or the client level, but it can also happen in the aggregate. So, Mark, about 3 years ago, we did something at the Iscential level that I don't think we had ever done. Is you did a full-blown analysis of some of our private client carriers to assess what trends are we seeing by product and by agent. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, when I came on, Brad and Warren asked me to do that project for the private client carriers. We would look at the agent loss ratio with that each agent had, how much revenue and premium was being generated, that type of thing. So we could see who was driving what, but you have to have those checks and balances in place. And some other checks and balances is, like I said before, I do a lot of the quality piece. So we do new business and renewal and rewrite audits to make sure that certain documents are in, the agent has put in there. So it's important because a lot of times, things do slip by. So don't forget about that.
And that piece is going to get covered at the staff level. And again, we just are trying to aggregate this together. And again, I'm going to get to a punchline where I want you guys to talk, not us, right? But we wanted to lay these pieces out. And then David mentioned this fourth one, and I'll just kind of go to a slide. To us, obviously, expectations from a client, the vetting from a client really happens when they come in the door. Obviously, there's some ways Mark, you didn't mention this, but when Mark did his analysis, I thought it was fascinating. For a couple of various carriers we had on the private client side, we actually got down to the level that said, hey, this David Hollingsworth client is wearing us out, right? He's had 5 claims in 3 years, and you may not even see it or notice it, right? Because of the book of business and everything, but being able to actually isolate, and we actually had a couple agents say, you got to fire that client. That client is, we are in a no-win situation. That client's got to go away because he's hurting us at the agency level. I thought that was interesting. But when you think about from a sales process, and this is just kind of things that we train our staff and our salespeople on very specifically. Who's the target market? Who are you going after? What attributes? What do they look like? Where do they live? Am I going to be able to solve their needs, right? And then at the bottom of each one of these, I was trying to capture, if you don't do that, what's the negative consequence, right? Some client may not be a good fit with the agency value proposition. I talked about that, as well as your carrier lineup. You may be trying to force a risk that isn't a natural sweet spot for a carrier that can have problematic issues later on down the road. David also mentioned you've got to understand who your client are and what needs and expectations they have, right? You may not give them a good solution. They may expect something that's different. They may not be versed in what's expected of them. And you may miss clues about whether that client is a landmine waiting to get stepped on. The third would be, to what degree do you and your staff actually do some pre-qualification of clients? And for us, we've taken this very seriously, especially in the new business or the new client realm, because not only if you don't vet them out, you may waste a lot of time, sweat equity, and you never book them. But even if you do put them on the books, it could impact your carrier fit. It could lessen the proper expectations with the client. And you may miss problem areas if you don't take the time to understand what it is they're looking for and do they have a good fit. On the fourth one, then take that pre-qual and say, if I'm going to land and this client should fit here, am I solving the right needs? Is this the coverage they're looking for? Do I have a good feel for the acceptability at the carrier level? How do you take that a step further? And then for the most part, and I hope all of you would echo this, we avoid monoline clients like the plague. If they are not buying our value proposition and not willing to have us solve all of their needs, for the most part, in most cases, we actually tell them we're probably not a good fit for them. So this is just us. And again, we take this training very seriously with our salespeople to make sure they're following through. To the far one on the right-hand side, if I've got a new salesperson and they're only quoting and I'm monitoring their quoting, I'll say, where's the umbrella? Where's the life? Whatever it is that's a full quote for you, you can inspect that to make sure, are they really truly offering it, or are they looking you in the eye and say, yeah, I said they should get an umbrella, but I never really put one in front of them. That's a sales technique to, obviously from a sales management standpoint, to make sure if you expect all lines to be quoted, then you should inspect that element of it. So when we talk about remedies, right? You know you got an issue. What do you do? So first of all, you have to have regular, repetitive process and carrier training, right? Mark's job got created, and hey, I didn't put it in his title because it was actually something we thought collectively we'd do, but we wanted somebody waking up in the morning. Mark's responsible for making sure quality happens, and quality happens as it relates to not only did I get the right information to be able to bind the person, but did I actually follow through in everything procedurally we expect to be able to have a good client that's bound and with the carrier, right? So that process element gets inspected. Plus, we do carrier-based training. We do carrier-based training on our end, and then we leverage our carriers. Hopefully, you guys too. We have weekly lunch and learns. Tell us about your process. Tell us about your product. Tell us about your changes in coverage. And we expect anybody that is using or touching that carrier to attend those webinars that are hosted by the agent or by the carrier and hear from their voice aside from just your staff voice. Auditing and keep me honest, Mark, whether it's you and or Stephanie, but talk about some of the auditing you do from what you audit and the frequency.
Yeah, typically we're auditing new business, and I believe it's rewrites, right, Stephanie?
Correct, yes.
Each month, and we'll go through. There's some certain guidelines that we've put in place as far as what we need, like assigned application, assigned rejections of, say, flood or whatever it is. But we'll do that, once a month, and then give the opportunity for the agents to grab that information if we don't see it there. Now, some of the big things or a key is documentation of whatever system you're using. That's imperative. They've got to document what they're doing, so anybody can see what's going on, in that particular policy. But we usually see the majority of those cleared up, but it's always the reason why we do it is it protects the agency because of E&O claims.
Yeah.
Okay. But yep, Stephanie. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, we do get some pushback, but there's only 2 cases when we're gonna get asked for that documentation, and that is an audit from the carrier, which you want to pass, and an E&O situation where you are trying to use your documentation to prove that a customer did or did not make those selections.
Yeah, because many times we'll have an insured saying, I didn't sign a rejection form, and the agent doesn't have it. So.
And then the third one really kind of complements the audits, right? So Stephanie, I know for you do some regular reporting to see, for instance, do we have open items? Do we have some incomplete pieces? Are the things in theory that an agent or a producer has been responsible for getting that haven't been satisfied, right? So we try not to let any of the things that we think are important along the way get lost in the shuffle or fall through the cracks, right?
Right.
We talked about the structured sales process, went through that. We talked about the carrier support. And then we watch loss ratios on a lot of respects, not only from our standing with the carrier, but we actually manage to, oh, by the way, how are we performing with the very carriers? I'm assuming you guys do as an aggregate and association to make sure that we maximize the incentive opportunities. It's not just about the money, but if you're going to have these go-to carriers and you're going to have these relationships, that's something that we've, instead of taking it by chance and hoping that we're okay, we try to make sure we manage too. And then look, there's different things you can do from a writing limitations too. So from an incentive standpoint, you think about it at the agency level, some of the tactics you can take would be, look, you set targets, loss ratios to be able to qualify for bonus incentives and contingency. I'm assuming you guys as an association do that, but having and managing and watching that on a regular basis so that you can maximize the revenue opportunity is important. I don't know how frequently, but I can tell you at a minimum, we're looking at how we're performing and where we're tracking at least on a quarterly basis. And for the most part, we look through the first year, we'll do a first quarter, second quarter, and then if we see something that is running hot or we either want to maximize or we're in trouble around, we'll then watch those monthly for the remainder of the year so there's no surprises for us. And then regular updates on loss ratio for the carrier. We want to make sure that we touch base with the carriers. Mark, I know that you probably have gotten drug into a lot of those conversations. Instead of just talking about what we've written, right? Actually get a feel for what things can we do. The other thing that I can tell you from a carrier standpoint that I always encouraged was, look, ask me suggestions. I have agencies doing this. I have agencies doing that. one thing that I do know is, look, every state's different. Every state's different as it relates to the environment, the markets, the performance. So asking Georgia, for instance, unique situations or recommendations can maybe, if you've not done that at the carrier level, they're going to be very willing to tell you things if it's going to have better business and a better partnership. At the agent level, new business can be based on not only the agent performance or the agent performance, but the agency performance. So we have ways, and we do this when we bring on new agents. We actually set up a validation schedule, and not only is their validation driven by their performance, how much they write, but we actually track and watch what's the quality of business, not only from a retention standpoint, but also from a loss standpoint. And then on renewals, if any of you are paying renewals to anybody at your agent level, to what degree is the renewal based on not only the size of the book, but the quality of the book? And again, retention and loss ratio can have an element within that too. And then from a limitation standpoint, these are things that we've looked at too. And Mark, I think your example yielded it when we did this a few years ago. We tell our agents, look, carrier access is not entitled, it has to be earned. And so people within our group have to be able to demonstrate that, that they're going to not jeopardize our carrier relationship and put risk through there that aren't worthy of what they want to do. So we review that from an agent level. We watch what they're placing. We actually watch if for instance, if we get a lot of declines, that's just as a negative of an issue with the carrier that we want to be able to manage to. We try to make sure that we understand the target market fit, and then we do a review of our carriers based on both production and loss ratio, not only at the agency level, but the agent level, so that we can understand maybe on an annual basis, hey, Brad, you know, we had some problematic situations with, for instance, Cincinnati. We're going to remove Cincinnati from your appetite, and or what is broken about what you're doing, and can we actually fix the problem that we're seeing? How about that? I preempted you from a slide. So again, and I'm getting ready to go through what we're going to cover with your staff in a second, but anything that you guys see or what are curious about from your seat at the agency owner level, that you're seeing or you'd want more information around?
I'm concerned about holes. So if we have holes that they're going, well, why aren't you talking about this, that, or the other thing? Please raise your hand and speak up.
Nothing, we nailed it. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I just have a question. Like, throughout the course of this, are you guys going to be able to teach us how to basically get off accounts? Because there's times that, you know, we'll call the carrier and they'll basically tell us there's nothing we can do. That's on your own. So it's like, how do you get off accounts, you know, without ruining a relationship or coming across as rude, where, you know, the client might go out and post some sort of negative, you know, comments about you on social media?
That's actually a great question. What we can do is we're going to get to the agenda for the staff here in a second, and if we've not covered that, I'll make sure we add that just as an example.
Added that to our parking lot.
It's a great catch, Don.
Get to it.
Go ahead, Gene.
Hey, Brad. As far as the age of the home, do y'all have a standard right now that if a home is at a certain age, that you're going to push them to a specific carrier, or you're going to do something different with a home? I thought that was interesting, and I feel like we are lacking that. And we have a carrier that's really good with old homes, but it's also a partner carrier with S&A that I'm thinking maybe I don't want to put them with one of my A carriers.
So, and Stephanie and Mark jump in a second, but from our approach, we're regularly revising fit as it relates to carrier appetite. I mean, and they're always changing from that standpoint.
So one of the things we do, which you got to think about as maybe something you as a group want to consider going forward, is we have a call every Tuesday with every producer. So part of it's to give them some encouragement, motivational stuff. But we go through a session where they can ask any question, and what happens is they learn from each other that, hey, we're finding ABC company is getting off homes with roofs that are more than 20 years old, and somebody's got, or I have a new prospect, and they got a 25-year-old home that's got a metal roof on it, and who's the best carrier? So we're letting the producers help answer those questions as opposed to us answer them, because they're out in the field day to day with some of that stuff. So it's another way to get at it, as opposed to having strict guidelines, because as Brad says, this stuff is changing, at least in the markets we're in. This is changing daily, if not weekly, if not daily, who's getting on and who's getting off of certain kind of risks. So, which gets back to the first question about how do you get off an account? So I think that's a great question. I don't know if that helps you or not, but that's one of the processes that we're using to be very immediate with our responses and let our producers know what's right, what's wrong, where to go, and what options there might be.
So Gene, I guess to what David's point, we do have some standards that I think go across all carriers as it relates to whether it be auto or home that are minimums around what we expect. We also then create that forum that David talked about, that we either have an open forum where somebody can ask a question, or we try to make sure that we have experts within both our sales group and our service group, that if there's something that is either unclear or maybe gray, that we have an open forum. And we do that for two reasons. One is because, to David's point, things are changing. So we want to give the most current answer, most correct answer. But secondly, we don't want somebody that's not maybe necessarily familiar with a given carrier well enough to spend an inordinate amount of time trying to find an answer when we can phone a friend and get that answer correctly.
Well, and this kind of ties back to the checks and balances thing. You'll hear, and that's why we have Stephanie on here. Our service partners are equal partners in underwriting and helping us retain and write good risks. So it's not that we just dump it all on the producer side, but we have Stephanie and her team are equal partners in making sure we're doing the right things all the time.
Right.
So,
Hey,
just
David, can I add
answer
something?
your question, Gene?
Yeah.
Okay.
Brad, can I add something?
Yeah, please do, Mark.
Yeah, and David mentioned those Tuesday calls. One of the big session when we get to claim questions, we'll go through operational questions and personal line questions, commercial lines. We get to claim questions. We have a lot of participation when we get to claims. They want to know how things are handled, that type of thing. But claim education, I can't tell you how important it is for agents to know processes, like what's involved with a foundation claim. So and you can tell your client, it just adds value and gives the client confidence in you. So if you have a claim contact that can be the expert, I would definitely recommend that.
Go ahead, Troy. I know you got your hand up.
All righty, thank you. I appreciate that. So I guess would maybe be helpful for, you'll have certain standards for a homeowner client, an auto client, and standards of no mono business or such. But to be able to share some of those standards with our staff members so that our staff members could hear those from others other than just who they would deem their boss.
Absolutely. We will gladly incorporate that into and it's probably just as good of a segue as any. This is really, this is a training curriculum that, as we talked with Kevin and thought what was most relevant, this is a training curriculum that we were going to try to provide to your staffs. Now, one clarification for the invites I sent, right? So it was asked to be able to have, we're going to do a session 1 and a session 2, because obviously people would be nodding off or going to get a meal, right, if we tried to do all of these at one time. And then I did 2 dates, right? So right now, each of you got an invite for, I think, the 16th and the 17th for session 1. Our thought would be you would forward to your staff whichever one either they want or they would like to participate, but we're giving you two options within each session. So it's really just 2 trainings, but I'm going to have four settings. That makes sense. And then we're going to record all 4 so that they can get caught. So back to what you just asked about, Troy, is when we start to talk about, so for instance, in here, we're going to start to talk about what are red flags, what are things that we look for, what are the standards, how do we recommend you have target clients, full accounts, and good fits. So we're going to give you examples of what we do, whether it's techniques that are general or things that we've developed that we think are necessary pieces up front so that you don't have a surprise later on. Does that make sense? Okay. So let me kind of walk through these, and then we'll field questions in because I want to respect time, but we can stay over if you guys need to. So we broke the training up into 4 broad categories. What are some tactics or techniques to make sure that you're getting the best quality business that you can? Second of all, what are techniques to be able to prospect and to pre-qualify clients? Thirdly, what are some application standards as it relates to when you're taking an application, what requirements you expect, what answers are you getting, and some of that may be above and beyond what a carrier may require. And then thirdly, how do you audit and control as it relates to how well the client fits and are they set up properly within your agency? So my question to you guys, we can be pretty fluid, whether it's now or I can send you this presentation too, so you can see it, look at it. But we'd love feedback from you if there's something missing, something needs emphasized, or something you don't think is needed. Go ahead and tell us that, because as we build out the curriculum, we can be flexible from that standpoint. Any comments, questions? And again, I'll email it to you so you can all kind of take a look at this and see. But anything from a reaction standpoint?
I think it looks great. I really appreciate y'all taking this into account. And I think something that I went ahead and did, and I'm sure we've all done some version of it, if not, prep your team for what they're going to see. Like I just literally took y'all's list and sent it to the team to say, this is what to anticipate. So they've got at least some understanding coming into it. And I'm going to go through kind of what we've done today with our team in preparation for next week.
So Abigail,
thank y'all.
This is why you're on the call. You know that, right? So
by the way, Abigail, we miss you.
We do miss you, Abigail.
You guys. I'm so glad we're doing this. Yeah.
But we put the slide in here. You actually teed it up for me. This is what we need from you, right? We need feedback on how well this aligns with your agency. We need feedback that you're going to emphasize the focus and importance of it. And what expectations do you have of your staff around this, right? Because look, I guarantee you we'll get through all 4 sessions, but if they're not participative and they're not buying in and you don't set the stage, or if there's something you want us to say to set the stage, fantastic, we'll do that. But I don't want this to just be something generic that's not adopted and not lived as we move on.
Yeah, and Brad, you're making a good point here, because I'm going to be real blunt. If you're telling your guys to write anything that comes in the door for whatever reason, and we're going to try to spend some time talking to them about how to look for quality folks that have, the white picket fence, 2 autos, 2.5 kids, a dog and a cat. it ain't going to work because the alignment, that first piece and the expectations have to really match. So you have to really think about what it is you want in your agency. So if your agencies take all comers, probably it's not going to change your outcome a whole bunch. If your expectation is we're looking for these kinds of things in general, it'll probably have some pretty good impact to just help people. It's not like they're going to learn some crazy brand new thing they've never thought of, but it's going to help them readjust, reevaluate, and get back in line with what you're looking for.
And David brings up a good point. And Stephanie, you of anybody can have the testimonial around this, right? It takes that effort to actually reinforce the expectations you're setting for it to become real. And you know, Stephanie has basically been anointed that Warren may say something, but if Stephanie says it's the way it's got to be, then that's the way it's got to be. And I bring that up because, Abigail, for all of you to adopt this, you're going to have to actually manage to it. Yeah, because it may be something that people will care about for 60 days, and then something new is going to come up, and all that kind of learning or emphasis may go away.
Yeah,
and I think that brings up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, another point, Brad, that no, you're fine, David. Another thing that we had talked about a little bit in our last SNA meeting in person as we were preparing for all of this, kind of entering into these sessions, was we talked about, you know, a lot of this came for us from the pain point of losing some bonus dollars this year, right? As a group, that was a big driving factor for us. So how does that translate in your agency to your people, to your service people, your sales people? Do they get bonus? Do they even care that they're writing this business? Like, what is it that's going to make them connect to this? And like you just said, Brad, like push it past 60 days of remembering, right? And like being on top of it for a hot minute. But like, what are we doing as owners and principals taking care of our people so that they take care of our business, and how, so that it can create an impact for them and it can be something that they adopt easily and with purpose.
Yeah, and I can tell you that we very publicly share how we're performing, not only at the top line, but how we're performing as a company. I would tell you, for the most part, for instance, for our service people, they're rewarded with the stability and the profitability of the company as it relates to their position in the company, raises, and getting to do new things. So we don't necessarily have a profit share per se. Obviously, depending on you could get creative and do that. We do it in the fact that we try to make sure that people feel that they're with an agency or a group that is solid, has their best interest in mind, committed to training them, right? It's actually a very specific learning expectation. In fact, we tell people, whether they're with us or looking to come with us, if you're not going to be a lifelong learner and evolve, we're not a good fit. And then on the sales side, again, we do everything we can to weave not only what they write or how much they write, but what they write and how they go about doing it.
Well, and Abigail, you can also manage if their profitability is not good. You can limit what they do, or you can require them to do more. And do more may be, I'm not going to take any business from you unless you've actually sat down with a client in their house, looked at the house, seen the car, done all that stuff. So there's different ways to get them engaged. But the goal, from what Brad's talking about, is the carrot approach, which I strongly endorse. But there's if you have to, you can put underwriting limitations from your agency on them that are going to tie to what the carrier is expecting. So.
Yep. And I do want to be cognizant of everybody's time. I will get this presentation out to everybody so you can review it. If anybody has any suggestions If you can get those suggestions to us by, say like at least by Monday at noon, we'll try to incorporate that. The advantage I do have is we've got 2 sessions that are staggered. So, but if there's something we're missing, we've captured a few. Getting off the account will get claim training, potentially standards around home and auto, staff connections. We'll make sure we touch on that. I want to make sure that I'm giving the right message to staff versus you guys. But would love your feedback because it doesn't do us any good if we spend an hour of your time and we're not hitting the mark.
Hey, Brad.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of go on what Abigail was talking about a minute ago, how we do. I'm just saying my agency, my staff does know about our bonuses. I'm openly and freely with them because I talk consistently about the agency health. We're always talking about agency health, and they know that that's where truly the profit comes to from to the agencies, to the profit share. That's where I get paid. And, I'm openly about that. And then when we do have losses, we share those losses. I mean, I go through those losses and say, hey, let's, any loss over $50,000, we'll sit down and talk about it. Even the smaller ones we'll talk about. Would we wrote this again? Did we make a mistake? Or did the previous, sometimes it's a former employee. Sometimes, weather happens, stuff happens, but we do re-underwrite after every claim to look, would we do it again?
Yeah.
But I do come back. I think the staff needs to know. I personally think staff needs to know. I know some of you don't want checks mailed to your office. You want them secret, and that's fine. You may have your reasons for that, but I want them to know where we're excelling and where we're not.
Yeah,
that's just
Kevin, to your point, without that profit, you can't continue to invest in the agency.
Right.
So having the conversation that the bonus, contingency, whatever you want to call it in your agency, that's how I'm able to invest in the agency. The commission income pays for your salaries and keeping the lights on. It's that contingency bonus that allows us to grow, expand our markets, and do all those good things. So I think, Kevin, I hate to admit this in front of all your peers, but you've got a good model and I'm proud of you. So
Well, and Kevin, yeah.
Let me just say, today of all days, I brought 12, our church did a fundraiser, and I did 12 Boston butts for all my employees that work in Blue Ridge. So I told them, I said, hey, here's the meat. Y'all have to keep delivering the potatoes. So
yeah, you can also have nice trucks too. So
oh yeah.
All right. Hey, we are going to jump off. I apologize for going over a little bit. I'll send you information. Don't be shy. If there's suggestions around how to make this as impactful to your staff, please tell us that so we can hit the mark over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
The opportunity.
Thanks, guys.
See you now.
Thank you so much.